Hey, this is Dave from metalepidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. What's happening, guys? On this video, we're going to be breaking down the new album Años En Infierno from Californian heavyweights Xibalba. This band formed in 2007, and Años En Infierno were the band's fourth full-length album, which will be released on May 29th through Southern Lord Records. Now, most of the track titles on this album are in Spanish.
Well, it's lucky that we come from the proud Spanish lineage here in Scotland, because that way no one can accuse us of pronouncing anything incorrect, Dave.
Spanish is not our forte.
Yes.
Just putting that out there.
Yeah. Beer, por favor.
English is barely my forte. So apologies in advance if Duncan or I, probably more likely I, butcher any of these track titles.
Yeah, he's going to butcher the track titles. I'm just going to offend everyone anyway. That's the roles we've pigeonholed ourselves into, Dave, and I, for one, am happy about that.
I'm up. So that disclaimer out of the way, let's move on to the album review. Now, bit of background. I was a bit of a fan of this band back in the day. They released an album back in 2012 called Hasta la Muerte, and it was a devastatingly heavy release that not only delivered kind of huge, doomy, hardcore riffs and guttural vocals, but it came with absolutely visceral production as well. They followed that up in 2015. And I think, I mentioned this to you earlier, I think one of the guys actually reviewed this on the Rock and Roll Review website when it was still going. And as much as I liked that album, I didn't think it was quite as memorable as Hasta la Muerte. For me, didn't have quite as many kind of standout moments. Whilst the production was still very solid, it was a little bit too kind of muddy for my liking. I did hear them kind of go or lean more into their kind of death metal influences on that album as well, and a little less the doomier style stuff that you heard on the 2012 album. So when this album dropped into my inbox, I was definitely intrigued to hear what 2020 Xibalba sounded like. First off though, before we get into the music, Xibalba never disappoint with their album artwork.
Oh yeah, this is minted.
The cover on this album is really nice. It's a nice addition to their back catalogue. It's designed by a guy called Dan Seagrave, who I'm pretty sure did their previous albums as well, but he's worked with like Entombed and Suffocation and stuff like that. So yeah, very cool artwork, digging that. What about your background, Duncan? Do you know much about Xibalba? What's your thoughts?
So this was a first time listen for me. I can't even remember anything coming into the website way back in the day for them. I dare say it will have, and I dare say it will have been lost in the "is this a doom band?" No, then I will not be listening to it. I will park it in the pile that I will get around to eventually, which was never. Never going to listen to the pile. I mean, from the album artwork that you so excellently pointed out, I was expecting something death metal-y. It has the vibe of a death metal kind of cover. I was pleasantly surprised when I hit play on the album though, because that's not necessarily. I mean, it's in there for sure, but that's not what this band is by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, this is my first time listening to Xibalba.
Nice. And what was your feelings? What did you think?
As I said to you just before we hit record here, it is like the satanic spawn child of kind of early 90s Sepultura and Slayer, but just really fucking heavy. And what's interesting is the first half of the album has that more kind of heavier, kind of tribal, thrashier, kind of Sepultura vibe, and then the second half of the album with the kind of dueling guitars and the specific way they use their kind of dissonance in the riffing is much more Slayer based, but the production on this album is fucking pummeling. It is like so heavy, like so heavy, and it's mostly controlled by the drums, which is why I get a feeling that you were all over this when you listened to it. It's so drum heavy, but it really works. I think I don't even necessarily think these guys are detuned that far, but very much like a band like Gojira will implement like really good percussion to amplify the heaviness of sections. That's kind of what Xibalba are doing. What I liked about it is that they are a band that don't feel the need to overstay their riffs and overstay their vocals. They're quite happy to let 2-3 minutes go by without necessarily any vocals happening, in favour of just like really kind of setting up the next part of a song or building into it. And at times as well on the album, there's really good use of kind of tonal dissonance as well. So they really go for like heavier sections with not the kind of knee-jerk expectation of what you would think the vocals would do. Like, because this album pummels you really early on with brutal kind of death metal vocals. And then there are sections where you're like, that, right, this is where the death metal vocal will kick in, and they don't do it. They almost tease you a little bit with it. And I really like that. It's, first and foremost, though, a no frills album. This album is out to make you headbang and make you feel every fucking muscle in the neck. I'd listened to it like twice today, which I'd listened to earlier in the week when you sent over, but I listened to it twice today back to back, and it's not a long album at all, but like when it finishes, you feel like you've had a workout. It really puts you through your paces. And I really enjoyed that. When the first like 2 songs had played, my thoughts were, is this just going to be, and we've spoken about this before, I like death metal, but I like death metal in conjunction with something else. I don't just like pure death metal. I find it at times a bit repetitive and a bit obvious, and I kind of had this kind of sinking feeling the first time I listened to it. Like, I was like, oh no, I know what this is. And it's entertaining, and they mix things up, and it's varied enough that by the time you kick into Abismo Part 2 at the end, you really do feel like you've been taken on like a trek, and they don't compromise anything. So yeah, I was very surprised when the tribal drum sections really hit in though, and they are so prominent in the mix. They're not like hiding them at all. You just add that extra level of interest to me, because it just adds a dynamic which we've heard other bands do, but it's very easy just to do poorly, and they do it right, and they don't overuse them either, which I think is to their benefit, not the detriment. Yeah,
totally. I totally agree with what you're saying on the production. That was like the first thing that really hit me when the first track kicks in, La Injusticia, I think it's called.
That sounds right, yeah.
I don't know. Straight away though, I noticed the production was like night and day. The drums like are really thick sounding, the guitars as well, but it cuts through really well. Sounds really punchy. The vocals were a lot less kind of buried in the mix, I felt, on this album than they were on the last one, and there's a little bit more kind of reverb on the vocals as well. It reminds me a lot of like kind of old school kind of death metal productions from like the 90s. This album, I think, was produced by Arthur Risk, I think the guy's name is, or Risk. He's worked with like Cavalera Conspiracy, Code Orange, Power Trip. I believe this is the first time he's worked with Xibalba though. But yeah, when that album kicks in, it's just like, as you say, no frills, no fucks given. It's just like an attack on the senses from the get-go. And it kind of, as you said, kind of toes the line between, it's got that kind of tinge of like old school death metal, and a bit of kind of almost 90s hardcore at times as well. But they, as you said, they never kind of linger on an idea too long that it becomes like monotonous, or and those like slowed down grooves, like, oh my god, they sound colossal, just absolutely massive. They keep things interesting. And their kind of love for like varied tempos and rhythms kind of like surge right through this album. The track that was called Santa Muerte, for example, was like littered with like double bass drums, blast beats, and then right in the middle of it, out of nowhere, there's this like Gojira-esque kind of breakdown in the middle. You can't help but make that kind of like disgusting riff face at, like it's just like, oh my god, it's just absurdly heavy. As you said before, like Sepultura, they've been pretty open about their influences with Sepultura in the past, and again you can hear it on this album. There's no denying it. You hear the tribal influence, like you mentioned on I think it's Saka that the track is called.
Yeah.
And that then leads into the title track on the album, where again there's kind of little nods to early Sepultura in the first half of the track, and then in the second half it's a kind of like a slow kind of riff heavy beast that just that's undoubtedly will create like pandemonium at live shows, of which I will be standing at the back of the room.
So we're old now, old and frail.
Exactly. Quite
the Mr. Glass of the mosh pit.
Yeah, absolutely. I quite liked En La Oscuridad. I think that's how you pronounce it. It translates into in the dark. It had a real kind of a really cool balance of like crowbar styled kind of doom, and then it had that kind of like obituary meets morbid angel kind of murkiness to it again. And I love that this band, they never leave you disappointed. Like, just when you think they've like hit their heaviest, they're like, nah, we're not done. And then they hit you with like another kind of parting shot right at the end of the track. The last two tracks, you mentioned El Abismo 1 and El Abismo 2. They definitely threw a couple of curveballs.
It slows the pace of the album right down, but not in a disappointing way. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Because it's so aggressively fast at the beginning. You know, like just like really just it's like it's like the band are you know, in some respects it's like a street fight, which kind of starts out really fast and heavy and brutal and disjointed and all, you know, just all kind of paws and fists everywhere. And by the end, it's a bit, you know, the fighter's a bit tired and he's picking his shots. And that's what it is. Like, the way the album closes out, in a lot of respects, I think makes the album. Like, it really, really does, because it's so... That's what I meant about, like, you feel like you've been through a workout, like, by the time you get to the end of it. It's really well crafted. And those two songs flow so well into each other.
Yep. I actually thought the kind of clean guitars and the clean vocals that were on El Abismo 1 had a bit of an old Machine Head kind of feel about them at times. That's what I was kind of picking up from it anyway. But during the track, there was these like almost like short kind of explosions of like chugging guitars and big thudding toms as well. It's amazing. And then that then leads into the last track, which is a little bit more aggressive. The opening riff reminded me a wee bit of, there's a riff in Refuse Resist that it was kind of similar to, but then it kind of it goes after about a minute. They leave that riff and then they put in a downright monster of a riff about a minute into the track, and it would just like, it'll leave you just weeping in a puddle of your own piss. Like, it's just ridiculously heavy. And then the track kind of fades out into kind of clean guitars, kind of dark doomy chords, and there's these kind of echoing kind of growls. So yeah, it finishes off and it's just what the Doctor ordered to finish the album off. Like, I really enjoyed the end of the album. As you've guessed, this album's right up my street. Like, it ticks all my boxes, to be honest. And any kind of issues that I had with Xibalba's last album have been completely rectified on this. They haven't drastically changed their sound, but I feel like they've tweaked their approach ever so slightly, just to make each track on the album a little bit more memorable. And if you like kind of staple that together with the faultless production, you've got yourself a mammoth an album, in my opinion.
Yeah.
What would you rate this album?
See, I've been going backwards and forwards on this one. I think it's a 4 from me, a 4 out of 5. I think there's a lot in here that, I mean, like I said before, like it's not necessarily the genre of music that I would reach for, like, just to listen to. Like, in a lot of respects, like, when it comes to taste, you are far more inclined to listen to a lot heavier stuff kind of back to back than I am. And it's not to say that I don't appreciate heavy music. I love heavy music, but I take it in doses. I pick my spots, Steve.
Yeah.
But listen to us through. I think it's just a really well crafted album, and I think the moments on the album where they've clearly thought about. I mean, for a band like this, it would be so easy to write just a one note, really heavy from start to finish brutal album. And I imagine they could churn them out ad nauseum without any issues at all, and play it safe and make a career out of doing that. I think bands like this that wear their influences on the sleeve but like to mix things up by adding. It's like what we've said with most of the reviews we've covered thus far on our podcast, is that it's all about shades that I really start to get interested in when bands and musicians can move out of the comfort zone and add texture and elements to their sound for the benefit of the song and not just to be heavy. That's where I really find an appreciation for bands just in general and songwriters, and I think that's what makes Xibalba really interesting for me. This is my first experience of them, but I'm already picking up their influences. You mentioned a couple of influences that I hadn't even considered when I listened to it. That makes me want to go back and listen to it again, and it's an album that will be in rotation for me this year for sure. It's a great one, trust me. It's a great one if you're out running. It really puts a spring in your step. And I listen to a lot of music while I go out running. So the second listen I did was out on a run, and it flows. It's a really good experience. It's a 4 for me. I'm really interested to go back and check. You said there was kind of doomier elements in their earlier stuff. I'd be really interested to check that out. But to be honest with you, if this is the sound they moved into, I think they're on a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I loved it. For me, it's probably a 4.5. I thought from back to front, it was a really, really strong album. And even though, as I said, they haven't really drastically changed anything, I think they've tweaked just enough to kind of elevate them to that next level. So check this one out when it drops. It's out on the 29th of May. Años En Infierno it's called, out on Southern Lord on the 29th of May. Really enjoyed it. If you want to check out the band, they are on Facebook, facebook.com/Place of Fear, and that's where you'll find the band Xibalba. That's us. We'll catch you again on the next review. Cheers, guys.
Bye.